The planet Volzora loomed ahead, a war-torn world of savage landscapes and towering structures built from jagged rock and metal. The skies were thick with swirling clouds of dust, and the ground was scarred with centuries of constant conflict. Volzora's inhabitants, the Volzori, had long lived under the rule of a fierce matriarchy. Women were revered as warriors, holding positions of power and authority, while men were seen as weak, nothing more than laborers and tools for reproduction. Here, strength was defined by ferocity in battle, and men, relegated to menial tasks, were forbidden from holding any significant leadership roles. The Volzori considered their way of life superior, believing that their dominance in all things made them the rightful rulers of the galaxy. But to humans, the Volzori seemed barbaric, trapped in a cycle of war that left no room for diplomacy. Captain Darius Cole had heard of this world before, but standing on the threshold of their planet, preparing for the first human-Volzori meeting, he felt the weight of what was about to unfold. This world, this culture, would test the very limits of humanity's ability to adapt and survive. Captain Darius Cole stood tall, his boots firmly planted on the cold metal floor of the diplomatic shuttle. His uniform was pristine, marked with the scars of countless battles, but his expression was calm, focused. Darius wasn't just any soldier, he was humanity's finest, a tactician, a survivor. Every mission he undertook had been a testament to Earth's creativity, adaptability, and ability to overcome any obstacle. And this was no different. In the Interstellar Alliance, humans were still regarded as newcomers, and not always with the respect they deserved. But Darius was different. Known for his strength, intellect, and resilience, he had earned a reputation across the stars. As Earth's representative in this tense meeting, he was the embodiment of all that humanity had to offer, a beacon of hope and strength. Yet as he looked out at the Volzori delegation, Darius could sense the underlying scorn in their eyes. The women of Volzora, tall and imposing, stood with an air of superiority, clearly unimpressed with the small group of human men accompanying Darius. The cultural chasm was evident. Humanity had come to prove they could coexist with the Volzori, but it was clear that the Volzori saw them as nothing more than inferior. The meeting room was stark, its cold walls a reflection of the growing tension between the two species. General Zori, the most respected and feared warrior among the Volzori, stood at the head of the table, her posture straight, her gaze unyielding. The Volzori were a proud people, their strength unmatched in battle, their ways ancient and steeped in tradition. "You call this a delegation?" General Zori's voice was cutting, and the other Volzori around the room snickered at the sight of the human men. "Humans are weak, fragile beings. You could not even lift a weapon without assistance. How could you expect to stand alongside us, much less be worthy of our respect?" The words stung, but Darius stood tall. There was no room for hesitation. The Volzori may have seen them as inferior, but humanity had a way of surprising even the most formidable of enemies. Darius refused to let the slight pass. He knew the only way to win respect here was to fight not just with strength, but with honor. "This is not a battle of strength," Darius responded, his voice unwavering. "It is a battle of will, and I promise you, I will prove that humanity has more to offer than you can imagine." The room fell silent, as General Zori's lips curled into a sly smile. She had been waiting for this moment, the opportunity to demonstrate her people's superiority. Her eyes locked on Darius, her gaze sharp as a blade. "Since you are so eager to prove your worth, I offer you a challenge," she declared, stepping forward, her tall frame casting a shadow over the humans at the table. "A combat trial. You will face me in the arena. If you survive, perhaps I will begin to understand why Earth deserves a place in the galaxy. Fail, and I will show the galaxy just how fragile you truly are." The challenge was accepted without hesitation. Darius's heart raced, not with fear, but with determination. He knew what was at stake. This was more than just a battle of muscle. It was a battle of culture, of humanity's survival against a system that viewed them as weak. His fists clenched, and he didn't even need to look at his team to know that they were ready to stand behind him. The arena awaited, a place where blood was spilled, where warriors earned their honor. Darius's resolve solidified. He was about to face an opponent, unlike any he'd ever known. But he was human, and no one could take that from him. The arena was vast, a pit surrounded by towering spectators, their eyes glittering with anticipation. The air was thick with tension, the faint hum of energy shields in the background. As Darius stepped forward, he could feel the eyes of the Volzori burning into his back, their scornful gazes seeking to break his spirit. General Zori appeared on the opposite side, her armor gleaming in the harsh light. She was a towering figure, the perfect representation of Volzori's strength, beautiful, deadly, and powerful. Darius couldn't help but respect her for that. But in this moment, respect meant nothing. The fight would decide everything. "You will regret this," Ixira taunted, her voice echoing across the arena. "You are no match for me." Darius did not respond. This was not about winning in the traditional sense. This was about survival. As the signal blared, signaling the start of the trial, Darius moved like a shadow, quick and nimble, evading Ixira's brutal strikes. He had trained for this. He had fought on Earth's most hostile terrains, against enemies who underestimated him, just like the Volzori were doing now. But as the battle wore on, Darius began to see cracks in the Volzori's arrogance. Ixira's strength was formidable, but she was not invincible. She had underestimated the human spirit, the one thing no alien force could ever anticipate. Humanity's resilience, its ability to adapt, had carried Darius this far. Now he would show the Volzori the true power of humanity, one that was not defined by brute strength alone, but by the will to survive and the courage to fight for the future. The battle raged on, the clash of cultures resounding with every strike. Humanity had arrived on Volzori, not as conquerors, but as equals, ready to fight for their place in the stars. And Darius Cole was about to prove that they belonged. The arena of Volzori was a monstrous colosseum, carved from jagged obsidian stone, lit by glowing crimson braziers that burned like the eyes of ancient gods. Towering walls loomed over the blood-soaked sand, and above them, tens of thousands of Volzori spectators roared with primal excitement. Their chants echoed through the high walls in a rhythmic thunder, war drums of a warrior people thirsting for dominance. Captain Darius Cole stood alone in the center, the only human in a sea of violet-skinned giants. His uniform was stripped down to a combat vest, his hands bare, his stance relaxed but alert. He wasn't just here to fight, he was here to represent an entire species. Above the arena, in a high throne of forged steel, sat General Zori, flanked by the Volzori High Council. Her eyes gleamed with contempt and curiosity. To her, this was entertainment, a formality, a human's last breath turned spectacle. But for Darius, it was more than that. This was the moment humanity had been waiting for, the moment to show that strength wasn't just in muscle and mass. It was in mind, in heart, in the stubborn will to defy the odds. As the gates at the far end of the arena creaked open, the ground trembled. Something massive approached. The crowd's roar rose to a fever pitch. Darius didn't flinch. He just whispered, "Let's begin." Through the open gate emerged Commander Syria, a living weapon of the Volzori elite. 7 feet tall, her body was carved from muscle and scar tissue. She wore ceremonial armor that shimmered like liquid steel and carried no weapons. Her fists were enough. The crowd chanted her name like a sacred hymn. To them, she was a goddess of war. Darius studied her calmly, noting her movements. She didn't just walk, she stalked, like a predator circling wounded prey. Saria sneered, sizing up the human, like she was already planning how many bones she'd break before he begged for mercy. "You are small," she said in a deep rumbling voice. "Soft, breakable." Darius smiled. "You talk a lot for someone who hasn't thrown a punch yet." The crowd hissed at the insult. Saria's eyes narrowed. In Volzori culture, words were secondary to action. But Darius knew better. Words could plant seeds of doubt, twist emotions, and make giants hesitate. General Zoria leaned forward, watching with narrowed eyes. She wanted humiliation, a reminder that humans were still beneath them. Saria raised her fists, the horn sounded, and the trial began. The air shimmered with energy, dust rose in spirals. Saria lunged like a boulder hurled by a god, fast, direct, lethal. Darius ducked low, rolled under her, and pivoted behind her back before she could react. He didn't need to overpower her, he just had to outthink her. Saria turned fast, swinging a brutal backhand, meant to shatter bones, but Darius was already gone, moving like smoke through her grasp. He wasn't faster in speed, but faster in decisions. Every move she made, he read before it landed. To the Volzori, combat was straightforward: dominate with force, crush with strength. But humans had learned to fight in the shadows of extinction. On Earth, you didn't survive just by being strong. You survived by adapting, by outwitting. Darius ducked low again, aiming a kick at the back of Saria's knee. She stumbled, only slightly, but in this battle, that was enough. "You hesitate when you miss," he muttered under his breath. "Predictable." Saria roared and launched herself again, fists pounding like meteor strikes. One grazed Darius' shoulder, sending him flying across the arena. Pain lanced through his side, but he pushed it down. Focus, move, survive. He feinted left, then jumped off a fallen stone pillar, and slammed both feet into Saria's side. She grunted, staggered, then spun with fury. Darius saw it, the fire in her eyes. She was no longer fighting to prove herself. She was fighting to silence doubt, and that was the advantage he needed. He began to speak while dodging. "You train for power. We train for survival. You expect us to break, but you don't see it, do you?" "What?" she growled, breath heavy. "We break, and come back sharper." He baited her into another charge, but this time, he led her into the arena's unstable central platform, cracked from centuries of combat. She lunged. He stepped aside. Her full weight landed on the weakened stone. It crumbled. Saria fell, slamming into the lower level of the arena, with a crash that silenced the crowd. Darius didn't smile. He just breathed. For a heartbeat, the arena was frozen. Then gasps, whispers, disbelief. Commander Saria lay sprawled among the rubble, groaning, barely conscious. Darius stood above, bruised and bloodied, but upright. A lone Volzori voice shouted from the stands. She fell. Another roared back. No, she was outmaneuvered. The ancient walls of the arena trembled, not with cheers, but with confusion. The idea that a human, male, small, supposedly weak, had just outmatched their champion, shattered centuries of Volzori belief in a single moment. General Zoria's face twisted with fury, but beneath it, fear. The performance had been meant to prove human inferiority. Instead, it had exposed a truth none of them could ignore. Strength was no longer just about size. High Council of Ultra stood, raising her hand. "The trial is concluded. By Volzori law, the victor is Captain Darius Cole." A hush fell, then a reluctant cheer, and then another. Within moments, the roar returned, not of hatred, but of awe. Saria rose slowly, her pride shattered more than her body. She looked at Darius with wide eyes, then nodded once. "Respect."
They said Earth was small, but when we spoke, the galaxy listened. And now you're here, not late, but right on time. This channel's been waiting for people like you, so don't hold back. Subscribe. This journey belongs to you now.
Darius walked to her, offered a hand, She hesitated, then took it. The image of a human helping up a fallen Velluxari warrior would be burned into the minds of every spectator for generations. Later, in the warrior's chambers, Darius sat alone, clutching a cloth to his bruised ribs. His breath was ragged, but steady. A small message glowed on his wrist pad, encrypted, and from Earth Command. "You've started something, Darius. They're watching." He looked up, eyes sharp. "I know." And in that moment, the human race took one step closer to rewriting its place in the stars. The Velluxari had built their society on dominance. Might was sacred, and power unquestioned. But now, they whispered of something new, of tactics, of cunning, of balance. The story spread faster than plasma fire. Children reenacted the battle in training pits. Elders debated in temples, and warriors once proud now questioned what strength really meant. General Lixira stared at her reflection in the war chamber, fists clenched. "That human rewrote our truth," she growled. Beside her, Counselor Vetra murmured, "Or reminded us we never knew it." Even Saria, now healing in her quarters, could not escape the weight of the shift. Her pride had been wounded, but something deeper had awakened. Respect. Darius hadn't just won. He'd proven that strength could wear many faces, and the Velluxari were no longer sure who the real warriors were. But the council wasn't satisfied. One victory, they argued, could be luck, coincidence, a fluke of terrain, or timing. "We need more," declared General Lixira, her voice hard as obsidian. "If Earth seeks a place among our warrior kin, they must be tested again, not once, but thoroughly." High Counselor Vetra nodded. "Let it be done. More trials, different fields, mental, tactical, spiritual. Let them face what we have faced." And so it was decreed. Darius stood before them, fully aware of what was being asked. Another fight, another test. But he didn't flinch. He looked straight at Syra, voice calm. "We didn't come to impress you. We came to stand beside you." She smirked, unimpressed. "Then stand in the storm, and we'll see if your kind survives it." Outside, the arena stood silent. Now, but soon, new challenges would rise. The galaxy had seen the spark. Now, it would test the fire, and Darius Cole was ready to burn bright. The air inside the Velluxara training grounds was thick with heat, dust, and the heavy scent of sweat and blood. Darius stood tall, his uniform torn and soaked in grime, as another mechanical behemoth charged toward him with bladed limbs spinning. He rolled under the whirring death machine, grabbing a chunk of broken metal as he sprang to his feet. With a precise throw, he jammed the gear into the bot's knee joint. Sparks flew. It faltered. Darius lunged. Swift, brutal, and efficient, the bot collapsed. The Velluxari observers above said nothing. They simply watched, unimpressed by brute survival. These trials weren't about winning. They were about breaking. Each challenge grew crueler. Poisoned air chambers, weighted climbs, combat against warriors who showed no mercy. Sleep was a fading memory. Food was rationed cruelty. But Darius adapted. He memorized patterns, turned pain into focus. Every moment was a test of will, and will was something humans were masters of. In silence, he endured, not for glory, not for pride, but to prove humanity's place. He wasn't here to be liked. He was here to be undeniable. Commander Saria watched from the shadows as Darius hauled his bruised body from the pit trap, blood streaking down his cheek. No human should have survived the last round. Yet here he stood, coughing and defiant. "Stubborn male," she muttered. but there was no scorn in her voice. Later, she approached him, her massive frame looming. "Why do you keep fighting?" Darius looked up. "Because the second I stop, I become the story you already believe about me." That answer stayed with her. When the next trial arrived, a mock battle against 4 Velixari scouts, Saria expected Darius to fail, but he used the terrain, setting traps, baiting them into one another's path. His mind was a weapon. Whispers grew. Warriors once laughing now watched with narrowed eyes. Some nodded in quiet approval, not because Darius matched their strength, but because he redefined it. Saria began training him privately. At first, it was duty. Eventually, it became something more, a bond forged not of kinship, but of mutual recognition, a silent understanding that power came in many forms. General Lexira clenched her jaw as Darius emerged victorious yet again. The council's cheers, the soldiers' shifting loyalties, it all stank of change. He was a threat, not because he was strong, but because he made others believe differently. In the shadows of the control chambers, Shira pulled strings. She reprogrammed trial droids to ignore fail-safes, slipped toxins into the recovery rations, spread whispers among the young warriors, casting Darius as a manipulator, a deceiver. Darius noticed. Healing took longer. Eyes grew colder. Even Saria became distant, uncertain. "Something's wrong," he said one night, sitting on the edge of his bunk. "They want me to break, but someone wants me erased." Saria hesitated. "Then I'll look into it." But trust had cracks now, and Shira knew it. She thrived in doubt. And as Darius stepped into the next trial, a holographic wilderness teeming with malfunctioning predators, she watched, smiling. One misstep, and the human would vanish, forgotten, just another failed experiment. "Why do your men not lead?" asked a young Velixari recruit during training. Darius paused, wiping sweat from his brow. "They do. On Earth, strength isn't just about muscle, it's about ideas, strategy, heart." The recruit scoffed. "Weakness." But others listened, and Saria said nothing. As the days passed, Velixari warriors, especially the younger females, began to question. Why were they taught that emotion was weakness, that empathy had no place in war? Darius' presence stirred something ancient, long buried. During a council meeting, Darius challenged a senior commander. "If strength alone made you supreme, why am I still standing?" The room fell silent. Shira called it insolence. Saria called it courage. The cracks widened. Velixari leaders argued in hushed tones. Gender roles, once set in stone, began to waver. Darius hadn't just fought their warriors. He'd started to change their world. And change is a dangerous thing. A siren shattered the tense quiet. Red lights painted the walls. The high speaker's voice boomed. "Seathrax ships incoming. Outer colonies falling. Prepare for war." Darius stood on the balcony, with Saria, watching the distant horizon glow with enemy fire. "They're not here for diplomacy," he said grimly. "No, they never are." The Seathrax were monsters, metal-fused beings, who consumed entire star systems. For centuries, Velixaria stood apart, isolated in pride, but now their walls were crumbling. Shira insisted on traditional battle formations. Darius argued for guerrilla tactics, flexible response units. Saria stood between them, torn. "You've seen what I can do," Darius pleaded. "Let me help." Finally, she nodded. "But this isn't just your trial anymore. It's ours." As ships burned in orbit, as warriors prepared for battle, a new kind of war was being born. One not fought by brute force alone, but by minds working together. Human and Velixari, male and female, old world and new. The Seathrax didn't care about politics. They wanted annihilation, but what they would find was something far more dangerous. Unity forged in defiance. And Darius, he was no longer the outsider. He was the spark. The final simulation chamber hummed with tension. Towering walls of obsidian metal surrounded a digital war zone, stretching out like a battlefield scarred by forgotten wars. Holograms flickered, displaying looming threats, aerial bombardments, armored juggernauts, and overwhelming numbers. Darius stood at the center of it all, calm, alert, every muscle and nerve honed for survival. Beside him stood a mixture of warriors, Velixari, tall, proud and bred for combat, and humans, scrappy, diverse and clever. None of them had fought together before. Their weapons, instincts, and tactics clashed like oil and water. "We don't win this by charging forward," Darius said, scanning the terrain with sharp eyes. "We win this by thinking differently." Together, some scoffed, others listened. The simulation launched. Chaos erupted instantly. Enemy drones descended like metal vultures, tearing through defenses. But Darius moved like a conductor, among noise, shouting commands, pointing out vulnerabilities, coordinating strikes. Velixari brute force met human ingenuity where brute strength failed. Darius found openings. Commander Saria led the Velixari flanks, her war cry a roar that echoed through the chamber. Slowly resistance formed into unity. Soldiers covered each other's backs. Weapons synced. Minds began to trust. And yet, beneath the simulation's orchestration, danger brewed. General Exaria observed from a high balcony, her eyes cold and calculating. Her fingers danced over a hidden console, subtly shifting terrain layouts and deactivating defense protocols. To most, she was an overseer. In truth, she was the enemy within. "They cannot win," she whispered, "not with a human at the helm." The ground shifted violently. Explosions erupted too close to the command teams. Communications were jammed. Darius narrowed his eyes. "Something's wrong. These aren't just simulations. They're trying to kill us." Saria caught his glance. Suspicion flared in her gaze. One by one, squads were isolated. Trust began to fray. The human side blamed miscommunication. The Velixari sabotage. Unity fractured. Darius pulled Saria aside. "This isn't an accident. Someone's trying to sabotage the mission." She stared, conflicted, before nodding. "Then we root them out, before it's too late." Saria and Darius worked in unison, silently weaving through the chaos. With every step, they gathered clues, unexplained disruptions, rerouted signals, altered data. Then came the proof, a coded override originating from Exaria's location. Saria's voice trembled with rage. "She betrayed us. Our own general." Darius nodded. "We expose her." Together, they broadcast the evidence across the arena, interrupting the simulation feed. The warriors stopped mid-battle. Silence fell as Edra's treachery played for all to see. Roars of outrage echoed. Velixari warriors turned their weapons, not on Darius, but on their disgraced general. Saria fled, her empire of lies crumbling. Breathing heavily, Darius turned to the crowd. "Strength isn't just muscle, it's trust. It's standing beside someone you once called your enemy." Saria stepped forward. "This human saved us. He saved me. That makes him one of us." Before celebration could begin, alarms howled. This time they weren't simulated. Real threat detected. A Velixari technician barked. "Sithrak's fleet incoming. Multiple warships. They've breached orbit." Outside, the sky darkened. Fires burned across the Velixaria skyline. The Sithraks had come, with vengeance and precision. "To arms," Saria shouted. "This is no test." Velixari scrambled. Humans backed them up. Darius activated external communications. "Earth Command, this is Darius Kane. We need reinforcements now." As the first blast struck the outer towers, Darius gritted his teeth. No more simulations. This is survival. The Velixaria streets turned into battlefields. Civilians fled while warriors held the line. Darius moved like a firestorm, organizing defenses, redirecting units, adapting in real time. We fall back to the inner core, he ordered. If they want to fight, we give them hell. The battle raged into night. Sithrak's forces swarmed like locusts, relentless and brutal. But Darius and Saria stood firm, shoulder to shoulder, human and Velixari. When the Zithraks unleashed their core weapon, it was Darius who found the weak link in their targeting system, and it was a Velixari engineer who helped him exploit it. The final strike came from a combined human Velixari unit, a fusion of alien precision and human unpredictability. The Zithrak's flagship exploded in a blaze of light. Cheers erupted. For the first time, the two species didn't see difference, they saw unity. In the aftermath, Saria stood before the gathered warriors. Let it be known, the strength of Velixari is not in blood or bone, but in alliance, in trust. Darius nodded, worn but resolute. Together we survive, together we rise. And across two worlds, a new chapter began, not of domination, but of hope. The battlefield had fallen silent, but its echoes lived on in the minds of every Velixari who had witnessed what Darius had done. A human, in the heart of alien warfare, had shown them something they had never expected, a different kind of strength. Where Velixari valor thrived on domination and hierarchy, Darius introduced strategy rooted in compassion, adaptability, and creativity. Velixari elders, once unmoved by outside ideas, now found themselves reflecting. Darius had defied orders, broken protocol, and yet saved lives. Velixari lives. His decisions in the heat of battle had spared entire units through cooperation rather than control. For a species that prided itself on strength, the concept of mercy and mutual reliance now buzzed in every council chamber. The youth looked at him with awe. They began to ask questions once considered heretical. What if strength wasn't just about who could strike hardest, belt toward strike hardest? What if it was about who could think quickest, adapt fastest, or care deepest? Darius had unknowingly planted seeds, quiet ones, but they were growing in the minds of soldiers, leaders, and perhaps most importantly, in those who would shape the future of Velixari society. Commander Saria stood alone, on the edge of the training ground, watching her troops drill under the new protocols. Once she would have dismissed Darius as weak, too emotional, too unpredictable, but the battle had changed her. She had seen him lead with clarity, even when surrounded by chaos. He'd chosen to save a wounded Velixari soldier over seizing a tactical advantage. She'd questioned it then, she didn't now. Darius didn't just win fights, he changed how people thought. He made her think. Her whole life, she'd followed the code of Velixari: strength, power, dominance, unyielding pride. But watching Darius risk everything for unity, for people he didn't owe anything to, shattered her assumptions. Now she saw it clearly. Real power wasn't just about what you could destroy, it was about what you could protect, and who you could inspire. She turned her gaze to the recruits. These warriors would be different, because she was different, and because of Darius, they would learn that power wasn't a fist, it was a choice. The diplomatic chamber buzzed with the energy of something once unthinkable. Humans and Velixari, negotiating as equals. Darius, seated at the table, but quiet, watched as the representatives of both worlds signed a compact of unity. Out of bloodshed had come trust, out of battle, a bond. This new alliance wasn't just political. Engineers and scientists exchanged data, philosophies clashed and merged, and military strategists debated tactics rooted in both instinct and empathy. Together, they forged weapons not just to fight, but to defend. They built ships that combined human ingenuity with Velixari precision. Training centers rose on both planets, filled with recruits of both species learning side by side. There was unease, of course, suspicion lingered, but so did hope, and in the center of it all stood the unlikely figure who had brought them together, not with speeches, but with action. And while the Zythrax threat still loomed, Earth and Velixari stood ready, not as separate empires, but as one united force. They offered him the highest honor a non-Velixari could receive: military advisor, strategic overseer, hero. But Darius shook his head gently. "I've done what I came to do." He stood aboard the transport back to Earth, overlooking the vast skyline of Velixari. One last time, a part of him wanted to stay, but he knew his place was not to lead the Velixari. It was to show them that leadership could come in many forms. He left behind a culture forever altered. In the barracks, Velixari soldiers spoke his name with reverence. In the schools, his tactics were studied. And in the heart of Commander Saria, something deeper lingered, a quiet admiration that transcended duty. Darius didn't need a throne. He had changed the course of a civilization, and that was enough. The crowd at Earth's central hub roared as Darius stepped off the ship. Reporters pushed for quotes, children waved signs with his name. But Darius didn't smile for the cameras. He smiled at the small things: a girl wearing a Velixari crest, a teacher explaining unity to her class, a mural of human and alien hands clasped together. He accepted the medals with grace, but it was never about the medals. The real win, he whispered to an aide, was changing their hearts. Commander Saria stood before a new generation, male and female warriors lined up side by side, equal in rank, equal in respect. The drills no longer favored brute strength, but strategic thinking and emotional intelligence. Gone were the rigid divisions. In their place, a new code: unity is power. She watched them train and felt pride, not in their discipline, but in their curiosity. They asked questions now. They challenged old assumptions. They grew, and as she passed by a training wall, she saw the inscription carved by one of the recruits: "Peace never lasts." As Earth and Velixaria celebrated their new era, strange signals were intercepted beyond the Andros belt. Ships unlike anything in known space, silent, cold, moving with purpose. Scientists debated, military leaders scrambled. The data made no sense. These weren't Zythrax. This was something worse. In a hidden chamber, Earth and Velixari commanders gathered. Saria was there, so was Darius, brought in for one last mission. "They don't want war," Darius said, eyes narrowing. "They want erasure." A chill settled in the room. The galaxy held its breath, and the story was far from over.
They can, but they never understood us. In our silence, there was thunder. In our eyes, war. This story isn't theirs, it's yours. This channel is yours. If you feel it, hit subscribe. Don't walk this path alone.